I guess you could say that music has been somewhat of a lifelong obsession for me. From playing in concert bands to putting together bands with my friends, to studying music performance and playing professionally, it's been the primary creative vehicle of my life. And while today it's commonplace for musicians to record themselves, home recording was much less common and much more limited when I got my Tascam Portastudio while I was in high school. Yet somehow, even with its simple feature set and ability to record only 2 tracks simultaneously to a cassette, those limits actually inspired a certain way of working. And that taught me a powerful principle, that limits fuel creativity. This is something that obviously doesn't only apply to art or music creation. This principle has been guiding inventors for all of humankind. So it was no wonder that when I boarded the 806 Deutsche Bahn from Berlin to Hanover on a recent trip to Germany, that I was curious how this idea of limits producing creativity had shaped product development at Sennheiser. Well, apparently some kind of Deutsche Bahn miracle happened that day, and the train actually arrived in Hanover on time. And after finding my way through the station to the place called Unterm Schwanz, which I'm told translates to under the tail, but apparently may also have a second meaning, I met up with our driver, Max. Max was completing his university internship at Sennheiser, and during the 30-minute ride from the station to the factory, he shared about his interest in music and how he was enjoying his time at Sennheiser. And little did I know I would hear this sentiment echoed by many of the people I met that day. My first encounter with a Sennheiser microphone was the MD421 back in my university recording techniques class, and it's become one of my favorite dynamic microphones. So it was a real treat to spend some time with one of Sennheiser's microphone product managers, Sebastian Schmitz, and learn a little more about this classic mic.
Well, back in the day, there was the old omnidirectional mic, the MD21. And as it was omnidirectional, it picked up ambient sound, a lot of ambient sound. And they requested for more directivity to reduce the ambient sound crosstalk from, if you're doing an interview on the street, to reduce the traffic noise and stuff. So this is why they came up with a cardioid microphone. The 421 came out like this in 1960. It was originally designed for broadcast applications, quickly became sort of an industry standard. And the guys quickly learned that they could use it on pretty much everything, especially when it comes to music production. Yeah, first they were available with different connectors. This is the so-called Kleintuchel with the famous bass switch. And then in 1998, the Dash 2 version came out. This is where we derived the compact from. The full-sized 421s have this bass switch, which was needed back in the day to compensate for the proximity effect. It was 1960. There wasn't much of EQ capabilities built in mixing desks. So to compensate for different distances, they needed this switch. But nobody is using that switch any longer. It's always in M. M stands for music, means a flat frequency response. S is for speech, which reduces the bass. But no one wants this any longer. It's always in music because every mixing desk can do the task of shaping the frequency response easily today. So what we did is left that switch out and the related electronics behind there, which is that much actually. This led to the 421 Compact. The rest is identical, it's the same acoustics. No, we have the same grill, see here, same grill. We have the same acoustic volume behind the capsule, and we have the exact same transducer. The main difference was the housing, and we did a lot of effort to make it as robust as possible. This is a special fiberglass reinforced body for maximum resistance if you drop the microphone, for example. This thing can withstand a lot of beating. The full-size 421 has this so-called quick release clamp, and if you accidentally hit that release button, the mic could easily fall on the floor. But on the Compact, we just integrated the stand mount. The idea with the 421 Compact, with leaving out the bass switch, was to make it more compact for more convenient positioning on drums, for example. You see, if you have the full-size 421 and place it here, and you have cymbals right on top of it, with an XLR connected here, it could get in the way. And this problem is completely solved with the shorter version. we came up with this newly developed drum clip, which easily attaches to the rim of a drum like that. And then you have it in the perfect position. The 421 has had a lot of influence on other Sennheiser microphones. It's a heritage mic in the Sennheiser lineup. You might remember the old 602 bass drum mic. Back in the day when there was no particular bass drum microphone on the market, 421s were used just for kick drum. And our first kick drum microphone, the 602, was actually using the 421 transducer. We used the very same transducer, but added sound shaping for bass drum. The 602 was the first Sennheiser microphone with a pre-shaped frequency response for kick drums.
And while the 421 is a heritage product that Sebastian and team modernized, Sennheiser's Spectera System is on the other end of the spectrum, pun intended, as it's a revolutionary approach to wireless. Sennheiser have always been at the forefront of wireless audio development, dating back to the first wireless microphone in the late 1950s. And with today's ever-changing wireless landscape, a new approach to wireless audio was needed. I was fortunate to sit down with one of Spectera's lead developers, Sebastian Georgi, to get some insight into this new product.
Sennheiser is well known for its innovations and gives us engineers a certain degree of freedom. So Fritz Sennheiser said engineers always need some time to just play around with crazy ideas. And this is the mantra we still have after almost 80 years of history now. And many of these ideas will never see a product, because it's just crazy. But sometimes you focus on these ideas, and we have research department. This is where I started the whole idea of having a broadband bidirectional audio system for in-ear monitoring and microphone systems. Together with Jan Waterman, he was more focusing on the audio, I'm focusing on the RF. And when we knew, okay, this is really a big potential for our customers, then we changed this project to a development project, and then we had, of course, our time schedules. And the idea of doing broadband research was basically that we faced real issues with fading on stage. So you have two antennas for diversity, and you have your 200 kilohertz microphone system, and it can happen in large venues that even after 10 meters of distance to your antenna, you already experience signal drops and losses in audio quality. And this is due to fading. You have multipath propagation in your venue, and the signals are sometimes destructively interfered with each other, and then the signal is lost. And this was the first requirement we had. We want to cope with fading effects. And then when you do that and you change the whole modulation structure, you can think about digital in-ear monitoring, word clock, synchronous operation, bidirectional communication, permanent remote channel, and all these beautiful advantages we have now. You do not have one microphone on stage, you have many microphone and in-ear links on stage. So we say each and every device occupies the entire TV channel of 6 megahertz, but only for a very tiny amount of time. So we slice now in time. And therefore we use TDMA, which is time division multiple access. And we adopted it and optimized it for the audio on stage, being it low latency, reliability, and all these precious things we have. Nowadays, talents on stage have 2 belt packs, one for the in-ear, one for the mic. The FOH engineer or the in-ear engineer has no idea about the remaining battery runtime of the in-ear pack. The in-ear pack is just a receiver. With this new technology, we have a bidirectional body pack. It has a headphone output and a microphone input in the same pack. It's all fully digital. And we have furthermore a permanent remote channel. So you have remote control over your entire show. You can, for example, control the audio gain when the talent is on stage. You can even do software updates over the air. You can update all the packs simultaneously, which takes roughly 30 to 40 seconds. So lots of ease of use we can offer. You can even decide, I have 10 packs which are operating now on stage, 10 others already in preparation, and then you change the resource assignments when the talents change on stage. So there are many new opportunities with this permanent remote control. We have a link desk software application for your Mac and PC, which can do all this remote control and management. And we also offer a web UI running directly on the base station, which you can just browse with your preferred browser. 1 week ago, we made it available to the customer, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. that you as an engineer start with an idea, have a very capable companion, Jan Waterman, and we both had the opportunity here at Sennheiser to explore this idea and to create prototypes, demonstrators, feasibility studies, and then accompany this idea from start to finish. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing for an engineer, so it's really a crazy journey.
Our visit that day happened to coincide with Sennheiser's Plugfest, which is an internal event where development teams from across the company come together to share what they've been working on. Spectera was on full display, as was the camaraderie and the collaboration. Lunchtime was enjoyed in the Sennheiser cafeteria. The schnitzel and the spätzle were very good, as was the conversation, and stopping to sit down and eat was a nice break. Quite a bit different from lunchtime in New York. Then, with a full belly, it was time for me to meet with the co-CEO, Andreas Sennheiser.
Solving problems is the source of creation, because if there wasn't something that wanted to be overcome, then there was just no innovation. So I think that holds true for a lot of milestones in the Sennheiser history, be it the first wireless microphone in 1958. I mean, getting rid of the cable gave a lot of more creative freedom. Then the first open headphone, HD 414 in 1968, that gave opportunity to listen to music in privacy and not just have a big speaker set in front of you. So there's always a big value and a benefit to overcoming these limitations of what exists. And I think that creative dissatisfaction that my grandfather has always had as a researcher, and also my father continued, that is really the basis of the innovation spirit of Sennheiser. When things are there, we kind of lose also interest in just maintaining it, because we see the chance to go beyond. We have the luxury that it's not very difficult for us to bridge the creative and the technology side, because a lot of our engineers are also trained, if not professional musicians. So we have really a perfect blend between people that love music and that are capable in technology. And that unites us really with our customers, because we can speak their language, we understand what it feels like in the rain as a front of house guy. Therefore, this connects us very well with our customer base. There's a lot of fun stories in terms of that we thought we had a great idea, and then ultimately the market told us that the idea wasn't as great as we thought. One example is our shoulder-worn surround device we brought out more than 20 years ago when 3D audio had their first wave. I tend to always look at these failures, so to say, with a twinkle in the eye, because ultimately they are products of engineers who are very passionate about their idea and really brought something to the market. And I think that's just what an innovative company needs to allow. Ultimately, I think that's just part of being an entrepreneur. You cannot predict the future, you can just try to shape it. And this is what we do as good as we can, being a reliable partner, reliable products that sound fantastic, and ultimately make the lives of our customers better.
Next on our agenda was a factory tour with John McGregor, who manages the Sennheiser Sound Academy. It was amazing to see all of the history on display throughout the campus, from the humble beginnings of the original farmhouse to the state-of-the-art manufacturing facilities, as well as the scores of historic products, and some curious ones, like cufflink microphones. Sennheiser's commitment to innovation was clear, and this only echoed Andreas's words about problems being a gateway to creativity. And then there was one stop that I made sure not to miss.
Yikes, this is super weird.
The Anechoic chamber. Wow, what a unique and somewhat eerie experience. At the conclusion of our tour, it was time to meet with Kai Lang, who is the product manager for the MKH series microphones. Having recently used the MKH 8018 to capture on-set audio from my short film Stillness, I was intrigued to know more about what makes these microphones different.
We have now the 15th anniversary of the famous MKH 416. So this microphone is one of the first microphones of Sennheiser, which includes the RF technology. And ever since then, more models appeared on the market. I brought especially the MKH 800 Twin, because this was the father of the MKH 8000 line. The capsule itself was so accurate in sound impression that we thought this microphone should be our new microphone for the future. And we made the capsule and the electronics down, and we came up with the 8020, which is an Omni microphone. This one has a wide frequency response starting from 10 Hz up to 60 kHz, which you will not achieve with conventional condenser microphones. This was the first, and we made this family complete with a cardioid and a super cardioid module. And then we developed further a wide cardioid microphone for this. And then we thought, well, the MKH416 is so well received and so often used outside. Why not bring in the next step, the advanced technology, to a new shotgun microphone? Because the MKH416 is an RF condenser microphone, but unsymmetrical. By now we have RF condenser technology, which is symmetrical. So you have two plates, in the middle is the membrane, and this is even more sensitive than the technology in the 416. I'm quite proud of the 8060, which is now, if you get rid of the XLR adapter, is half the length of 416, and especially for camera use cases, very common. With the last piece, the MKH 8018, I think we have more or less raised a whole family now. The MKH previous models had a very ruler-flat frequency response. At that time, I think it was the task for every microphone to be ruler-flat, because everyone thought if it is ruler-flat, then it picks up the sound just the way it is and reproduces it. But honestly, it felt a bit cold. And that's why we invented the MKH 8000 microphones with a special frequency response. So there was a lot of listening tests and adjustments of the frequency curve, and more the adjustment to the ears. You definitely hear the difference, especially when recording classical orchestras. We invented those microphones to record orchestras in a hall, for example. But the feedback we got is that those microphones are very good for nature recordings. The low noise, of course, and the sensitivity of the membrane is so good in combination to record even the quietest tweet from a bird or the sound of the ocean or something like this. So it's very, very accurate, and it reproduces the original sound very good. The RF technology of those microphones are very robust against humidity. So you can record in the rainforest, for example, or even at the North Pole where it's freezing cold. And we had some customer experimenting with the MKH 8000 microphone, and the camera did not work anymore because it was so cold, but the microphone was working. That's something you cannot do with the conventional microphones.
As the day was coming to an end, it was time for us to pack our bags and head back to Berlin. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that I'd have the opportunity to visit the Sennheiser factory, let alone hear directly from those who are pushing pro audio technology forward and developing new solutions to problems. And of course, no trip to Germany would be complete without a little burst on the Autobahn. So, as I stood on the platform waiting for the train back to Berlin, I couldn't help but contemplate where else music might take me in life.